Hello and welcome to Conversations from the A&amp network. In this episode I speak to cousins Wendy and Azumah, and they're both adopted parents. Even though they live in different countries, they have provided mutual support to each other in their individual and contrasting experiences of adoption. It's an interesting listen, and I'm sure you'll find the contrasting and comparable experiences something worth listening to. There's a little bit of audio overspill to start with in places, but we sort it out in quick order, so hang in there. As always, if you've experience of adoption, fostering or special guardianship from any perspective, personal or professional, and would like to share that on the podcast, please get in touch through Facebook, the app formerly known as Twitter, or you can email us at anfpodcast@gmail.com. Wendy, if you could just share your story, tell us who you are, why you're here, why you wanted a podcast, and maybe share a little bit about your link to Azumah, and then Azumah, you tell us about yourself. So over to you, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Al, and lovely to see you, gorgeous Azumah. Wendy Vincent, and I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada. I'm an adoptive mom. My husband and I are in the process of adopting a gorgeous, newly 10-year-old boy. And I am connected to this gorgeous human being, Azumah, because we are first cousins. Our parents were siblings. And by way of kinship adoption, I'm so grateful that Auntie Olive helped to raise my dad on the occasion of their parents' passing. So she is herself a gorgeous adoptive mom. I consider her a mentor. And I'm so grateful to be on this journey with her in my ecosystem.
Okay, I think that's an introduction to me, though I barely recognise that person. And of course, it's lovely to meet Wendy in this way, though we've met several times. You know, we regularly WhatsApp and message each other and record voicemails. But we've not. Have we met face to face? Not even in team. So we haven't. Well, there you are. So I'm here because Wendy wanted to do this podcast, and she asked me whether I would join, and I said, "Fine, let's do it." And yes, I think I do appreciate having someone who. It's sold when you have a blood connection or a connection, a positive connection, a positive family connection. You know, there's almost a shortcut to a degree of trust. So I would talk about things with you in a very sort of open way, or we would talk with each other in a very kind of open way, and have that sort of a positively shared family history. And it's really good to know that what feels to me like a unique story is in fact a shared story, shared with loads of people, but also shared with a member with my first cousin, a member of my family. Yeah, so that's for me what this would be about.
So that was probably the start point of how you introduced, or the idea of the podcast was that you were going to share a little bit about this sort of a connection through kinship. And so I don't know whether, Wendy, whether you want to share that. What is the connection between you, and how does that sort of fit in around the adoption story?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my dad is the youngest of his siblings, and on the occasion of their parents' passing, you know, our grandmother, as she was ailing, said to Auntie Olive and to Auntie Enid, you know, we might have to send your brother to an orphanage, to a Catholic orphanage. I remember this as a distinct conversation with my dad when he was, before he was traveling to Auntie Olive's funeral in England. And he said that Auntie Olive and Auntie Enid conferred with Grandma and said, no, we will raise him. And, you know, these are things that change generationally, change the trajectory of an entire family. And I'm just so grateful of that powerful conversation and the footprint of that conversation.
Yeah. So that's quite a strong connection, but it's only recently that you've sort of renewed that. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because Azumah and we've never met. I've actually never been to England. And and knowing that I had this blood relative who was raising a boy who was the same age as our son, this was synergy. This was magic. This was synergy. And I'm just, as I said, I'm so grateful. Like we can talk about things, and we have that, sort of ancestors in the background for us. So,
I'm almost not even sure how I realized that we had that in common. And I wonder whether we started talking before you started I think you told me, didn't you? Because I know when Mum passed away and Don came and Uncle Dickie came, I think that must have been how we just started talking to each other, which is not that long ago, just a few years ago. Don came to England in his 20s. So I was aware of him, and I knew him, and we knew each other. But he must have given me your details, and we just started talking. And I think you mentioned in one of your WhatsApp messages that you were adopting, and then that's how I told you. Although Dom must have known, because he met Moses, and they got on really well, which is to say that Moses took to him. So yeah.
But you've both got unique experiences of adoption, because obviously a UK, the UK model of adoption and the Canadian model, they're both sort of, it's the same language, but often it's a very different system, and also it sits within a very different culture, doesn't it? So, before we started, Azumah, you were talking about your experience of being a Black British woman and adoption, and how that was perceived within your family, within the community. And so could you unpick some of those challenges? Can I ask you why you came to adoption?
Well, I mean, I came to adoption for health reasons, like so many other Black women. Fibroids meant that I was unable to have children from quite a young age, which was sort of okay, really. I have my books, I have other things that I do, and it didn't particularly feel, problematic. But I also have a very close school friend. Literally, we've been friends since 12 or 13. And she adopted a little girl. She's also from the Caribbean, or Caribbean parentage. And that sort of made me, look up and think, oh, okay, well, maybe there is a possibility there. So we pursued it as a possibility, and here we are. The rest is history. I don't know that. I can't, unfortunately, award myself the status of speaking for a Caribbean community.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not going to.
As far as adoption is concerned, I can speak from my own perspective. In my own family, my mother was not keen on the idea of adoption, despite having adopted or brought up Uncle Dickie. I think her sense was bringing up somebody else's child in that context would be problematic. Problematic, and I think she had very negative views of what that child would be like, and what that lineage for that child would be like. So that was not a massive challenge. It just meant that when we were going through the process, I told my mum very, very little about it. I told my brothers, and I told other friends and people around me, but I just didn't say anything to my mum until he was here, until he was settled, until he was with us. And then we went round, and of course when she met him, you could do nothing but love him, because he's just this sweet little boy who wants to cuddle everybody and hang off your curtains and jump on your settee and just be a little boy. So that was fine. it's much more common in my partner's family. My partner's Ghanaian, and it's much more of just a thing that happens on an everyday perspective, that children are shared. Very often some families have, polygamous families.
Yeah.
So, children have relationships with several mothers, several women who are part of a household. The extent of, I think, of people being quite poor or not having much cash is such that children will go to a relative who's perhaps more able to afford to care for them. And it's not unusual. And people have all sorts of different ways of talking about family relationships in Ghana. So everybody's a sister and everybody's a mother and everybody's an aunt. So it doesn't feel so unusual. But for me, it wasn't something that I'd had any experience of within any member of my family or an extended community. Though having been through the process, I have got at least two good friends from the Caribbean. The friend I talked about initially, and then somebody who I met through the adoption process, who actually lives around the corner from me, who was also adopted. So the challenges weren't enormous. The challenges were not to do with community. They were just to do with the whole process and, court orders and all this kind of thing. And, it's not easy to explain that biography to a child. It's not easy to do that. So that those are the kinds of challenges, really, rather than, I think,
in of
cultural
itself,
challenges.
Yeah, in of itself, adoptions it's a pretty grueling process. The assessment and panels and all of those kind of sort of those component parts that you have to navigate yourself. But increasingly, we're seeing. I know there's been a drive by the government or by the sort of the national adoption agencies, the adoption agencies, is to kind of try and reach out to families of colour. And has that been something you've observed? And do you have any sort of reflections on that in terms of the workforce, that don't necessarily reflect the communities that they're trying to reach?
I took part in one of those national campaigns, the You Can Adopt campaign, and was very, very happy to do that, and very happy to be encouraging parents to be coming forward. I can't speak with any authority around data, statistics, and waiting times, etc. But I do know that that Black children, and I think particularly Black boys, wait much longer in the adoption system for Black families to come forward and look forward and look after them. And so I was very, very happy to be in that position, and very happy to be able to adopt a child who, nobody really says, "Oh, he really looks like you." I'm hoping one day that somebody will say that, because it will, it will make us really, really smile. But who could, reasonably look like our child? Or, I'm also no longer a teenager, so really, the maths work out that he couldn't possibly be my child. But if I can walk down the road and pass as his mum in terms of race, I can also pretend in terms of the numbers as well. So there's all sorts of pluses, all sorts of pluses for me, at least, in playing that role.
Thank you. Wendy, you've relocated to the car, so thank you. That
feels much better.
Turns out, like, you were in your location, it turned out looks like they're having a party, and you weren't invited. So if I could ask you to unmute, really, and just I'll get you to do that. That's perfect. We were just talking in terms of Azumah's experience of coming to the adoption process and some of the the peculiarities and challenges that maybe she faced in terms of family. Do you have any sort of comparative thoughts in terms of your experience of adoption? And again, most of our listeners are in the UK, so we probably don't know much about the Canadian system. Do you know if the system is comparable? Do you to talk about system stuff?
Actually, we don't. But I mean, there is definitely a very distinct legacy in Canada with respect to racialized children and adoption, particularly as concerns Indigenous children and the legacy, the harmful legacy of the 60s scoop and residential schools, where the schools were set up as intake for children who were broken from their families. And following in that is this, very colonial, generalized practice where Black children are overrepresented in child welfare in Canada. And there has been, conversation about reclaiming children. And that sort of influenced our decision as a couple, because Dave, my husband, and I, we got married as people of a certain age, and it was our first marriage, childless on both sides. And I too had medical challenges with fibroids. I knew I wanted to be a mother, and we were very intentional about early conversations with respect to adoption. Yeah, sort of a confluence of events for us, for sure. Yeah.
And some of that history stuff in Canada is very, it's sinister. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, I was trying to think of the right word for it, but I can't think you can. With looking back now, it's just there's nothing redeemable about that sort of that era in terms of the baby scoop, where Indigenous children were just removed from their families and sort of grafted into white families predominantly, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So is that impacted on the numbers of adoptions and sort of on wider attitudes towards adoption?
For sure. There is a second look at transracial adoption in the Canadian context, and trying to have outreach and better access for Black families who are looking to adopt. So it's two pieces. It's slowing down on over apprehending Black kids, but also making specific and diligent and holistic effort to court Black families toward adoption.
Yeah. So in terms of your experiences together, because as much as you've sort of navigated a different system and a different culture and different context, what sort of conversations do you two have about being parents to adopted? We both got boys, haven't you?
I just want to go back a little bit, a tiny little bit, because I know in the UK, and I'm sure it will be the same in Canada, I presume it is, that there is that whole system of appeals. It's a slow process of getting the order of removal, and then permission to adopt and all this. I don't even know officially what all the legal processes are. I just know that there are a series of them. And one thing I liked about the process, or that amuses me, is that the parents do have a right to appeal any decision, but they've got to ask for permission to appeal. Then they appeal, and then that appeal is either granted or not granted, and then it goes a step further, and then there is another right to appeal. And certainly for us, we had a day scheduled where he was meant to be moving in, and then the parents at the last minute put in another appeal. So actually we'd met him, and the way it worked, he's a smart little boy, but he said, "Oh, are these my new parents?" We got on well with his foster parent. So I think she unofficially allowed us to meet him, which I know brackets shouldn't happen, but it did. And then we were told that we were not allowed to see him. We weren't allowed to meet him anymore for months and months while this appeal process went through, which was horrible. And actually, which, because we got on well with his nanny, we didn't exactly stick to. But I think I'm not saying it as well as I want to say it, but the point of what I'm saying is, I think the real joy of that appeal process is that I can absolutely say to him and continually say to him, no, your parents did not abandon you. It was not that they didn't want you. It was not that they didn't love you. They loved you, and they went through this whole process so many times in order to stop this from happening. But in the end, they were not in a position where people felt confident that they could look after you well enough. And that's why you're with us. Which, when he's really annoyed with me and I need to say that sort of thing, I can produce that. So that's a real joy, despite the frustration at the time, but that's a real joy of that system, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please continue.
Yeah, as you were. No, but that stuff matters, doesn't it? That I think, which I think that totally links into the conversation you were having, Wendy, in terms of when we look at how our children's journey into the care system and then to our front doors, we've got to be able to sort of put our hands on our heart and say everything was done for us to not get here. That's really important, isn't it? And especially in terms of the Canadian perspective, where there's been lots of inappropriate stuff going on historically.
And another point. Sorry, Wendy, am I butting in?
Go.
Right. Well, just another point that I wanted to make, that before I went through this process, my hesitation was, I don't want to see or be part of or do social services remove children, well, not exactly on a trivial basis, but on an unfair basis, that very often people can make cultural assumptions about what counts as good parenting, or that my anxiety was that I would feel a degree of guilt that a child was being removed that didn't have to be removed. But they do send you a very, very detailed report of what that lifestyle was like. And I have to say, without saying anything at all about the report itself, from what I can see, no, that's not, this child is a person, and, they have their own rights and their own needs. And it's how best can they be met. And they can best be met, I think, in a different context. So those are my thoughts about process and him getting from one door to our door.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. Wendy, what do you have any sort of comments and thoughts on that in terms of your experience of your child sort of coming through the system to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because our little one, lots of caregivers in his short life, and he's actually from a different province, way across another part of the country. So we are ourselves still not officially approved, but you just think about that conversation about due diligence and making sure that all the adults are talking, and that now that there's all these systemics that have happened, but that everything that needs to be in place for him and available for him is. And I'm really lucky and fortunate and blessed that as part of my holistic journey as a parent, I have this amazing cousin halfway across the world who's walking parallel to me and who I can lean on for amazing insights, which no social worker can give us, right? And it's so powerful.
Yeah. Well, that is a nice link into that question then. So, I mean, what do you share? Because as much as all the journeys and the processes are all different forms, different social workers, but actually when it comes down to it, you're caring for someone else's child. And so do you talk often about that? Do you kind of, you phone message each other and go, you'll never guess what's happened today?
I suppose we do. Yeah, go on, Wendy. Go on.
Well, I was gonna say, Al Coates was first on our radar because of Cousin Azumah.
Oh, crikey.
Yeah, yeah, an early resource to the point where now Dave's taking a course with you through Adopt for Life. Amazing. But what you shared during the holidays, like that level of like closeness, and I was like, I can't imagine, but we've done that. And we welcomed him into our home and into like the insular parts of like our lives and our routine. It's made such a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about like wrestling with, I'm like, I would never, but I can see where, yeah, okay, these are really good things. This is like tactile, and it's because I'm not, in our family, I'm not the select parent. And I there's a lot of disadvantages of that, but there's also some advantages where I can like just keep going to my resources and going to my toolkit and like, put things in place, and maneuver things for the benefit of our family.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so, like I said, I'm so grateful for that. Like these are things that no social worker can help us with, and we've, applied them really carefully but successfully. Like we've got, all of a sudden during Christmas time, he had a toothache, and we let him stay on the floor in our room. Game changer. Soothing for him, and him knowing that this is how close and closer that you can be with us, because there is that trust issue, right?
Yeah.
Because he's moved around so much, but yeah. Come and like cross the threshold and let us provide care for you. There's a lot of just resistance to stuff that as he gains more trust, we see the milestones that are happening in his life. So when you had shared that about, he's with us every night, I'm like, oh, what? But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, and then we were told that it would happen. That some ways I look at our little one and it feels like he's regressed. When he first moved in, he would go to bed, and we'd read him a story because we like reading stories.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of, oh, can you just lie with me a little bit until I go to sleep? Okay. So we'd read him a story, then we'd lie with him, and then somehow we've switched from that to, oh, okay, well, our bedrooms are next door to each other, so it'd be don't be in your room and don't be frightened. And this is my childhood. I can remember as a child just lying in bed being constantly petrified, although nobody was very, very far, but I don't like the dark and all those sorts of things. And so maybe this is what I extend to him. To now, where really, as far as he's concerned, mummy and daddy's bedroom is his bedroom. So our bedroom is a mess.
Yeah.
Socks everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
And his bedroom, if I've cleaned it up for him on the Saturday, or if he's cleaned it, is completely tidy. But
you're meeting his developmental age. Again,
sorry?
I was saying you're meeting his developmental age.
Oh yes. I mean, he is a very affectionate and sweet boy, and he likes to cuddle and always has done, and he will crawl all over you and want to sort of worldwide wrestling. That's WWE. So yes, he wants to be around you, and always has been. Which, so I suppose that for us, I feel that there's almost an opposite thing of teaching him about appropriate boundaries. Certainly when his cousin comes over, we can leave them alone for 5 minutes, and then sparks will fly, or one of them will come and sit down next to us and say nothing, but that they've been fighting upstairs or something like that. So yes, I mean, I think boundaries and around trust. The trust expresses itself in I think in slightly different ways. Let's say we've had big screaming matches. I mean, he's only he was 4 when he moved in. I thought I'd have to wait until teenagehood for somebody to scream that they hated me. But the first time I refused to give him ice cream for breakfast.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I think that's totally unreasonable on your part.
Of course it is. Of course it is. I know, and of course you would hate this unreasonable parent who would stop you from doing these things. And that when he first moved in, that would happen almost on a daily basis. Not, whether it was ice cream or whether it was something else. I want to go to the shop in my underpants, or I refuse to put on clothes. Or I want to I want to break eggs. That's something he liked. I want to go to the fridge and I want to fling eggs over the house. And you are stopping me, and I hate you. But I would say that I think that there are elements of trust in that. I have to be quite loud and angry, because I don't know who you are and I don't know what you're going to do. So I'm going to push you to the edge of your reasonableness.
Yes.
But it happens very rarely now. It doesn't, it still happens, but not nearly as much. And he will. The freezer is a good one to stop him from the ice cream, because they great, it's in the freezer, go and have it. Which of course he can't, because it's rock solid, but so we learn our ways around it, really.
Is there a benefit to that, having someone who's sort of walking on a parallel journey and just being able to, if you're having that conversation with a friend who didn't have a child who was adopted, or a professional, they maybe would be giving you different answers and different reassurances, whereas being able to talk to someone, especially family, who's walked a parallel journey, you can there's a different answer, there's a different understanding. Has that been something that you've it sounds like that's something you've benefited from, Wendy?
Greatly. I mean, it's such a safe space. Our conversations are so sacred, and such a safe space, and so reassuring. Like, when you talk about the milestones that your little one has had, we look to that. And, when you're in it and you're living it every day, you don't, but then that conversation, and you have that look back, you say, oh my God, we have made progress. We have made progress. There are things that he has, his trust levels has increased, little advances and improvements of his trust. And you see how, he is trusting us, and he is letting us in these little ways that we take for granted, that I wouldn't even say that we're blind to, frankly. So, being able to look back and it's just the inspiration is real.
I mean, I'm very, very sure that anybody who found themselves in Wendy's company talking about these sorts of things would have a similar set of conversations, because you yourself are quite open, and you do sort of say what's going on, and you do sort of share those little milestones, those little victories, not victories because that has a connotation of battle, but those little joys, the incidentals that happen, which make you feel quite good. Whereas I find with the other people who I'm close to in this adoption process, I don't necessarily talk with them in the same way. For some reason, I don't know, but it's to do with personality. And I like the fact that we're cousins. I like that fact, and I like the fact that Dom, hey bro, hey bro, hey bro, it's really good, and that's that sort of cross Atlantic thing. But I'm resisting, and family gives us a shared history, and that history is it resonates quite deeply. But I'm really pulling back from some sort of closeness which is attributable to blood, because I also have a father, and my father's long time passed, and he was a no good man. He was a no good man, and there's lots of blood there, but there is zero closeness. And actually, I say to my son all the time, don't fantasize about your birth family. They are not perfect people. And if you think I'm bad, wait till you meet them. I don't say that, really. That would be terrible. But, I kind of try to, when he tells me that he hates me because I won't do this and I won't do that, you have to point out to him, there's no parent who would accept that, really. And don't think that if you were in this other context, it would somehow be perfect, because it wouldn't be. It
potentially gives a child a convenient fantasy that you are I drew the short straw and you are the worst parent in the world, and that's probably just not true at all.
Well, I have you met my dad? No, so and I try to point out that there are people who are blood relatives that stay together, and it's not always an ideal situation. So he's it's a hard lesson to get to grips with when you're 10, but unfortunately that's just a bit of the world that he's been confronted with at too young an age.
That's so true.
But the joys, other things that we talk about, the boys are quite different in age, and I think that makes a huge difference to the process, though not doesn't mean we don't find lots of things in common. He was 4 when he moved in, and I think at that age, the concept, we wondered how he would refer to us, what he would think was going on. And literally from that first day, are you my new mummy? Are you my new daddy? Fair enough. Okay. It was not a problem for him at all, really.
No, we've only had our little guy since he was 8. So I say he's 8 going on 28. He knows everything, and he is really intent on, as he has these challenges with the trust, that's how the challenges with the trust show up, is challenging us. So we just try to create as much joy and get his central nervous system regulated so that he can trust us more.
Yeah, that's straight out of social work speak, isn't it? Get him regulated. I guess it makes a kind of sense, but
So I'm aware that we've spent quite a bit of time talking now, so we're sort of wrapping it up. Do you guys have a plan to meet? Are you going to get together in real life somewhere transatlantically, Greenland or Iceland, somewhere between the two of you?
I'm sure we're going to have to do that at some point, Wendy. So if I get a WhatsApp from you saying, meet me at Heathrow in an hour, I will do my
Exactly.
best, or at least give you the address so you can let the taxi bring you around. So,
Oh my gosh. No, I look forward to meeting you in person. But yeah, I mean, I'm working on some Windrush stuff, so I do hope to, you know, I mean, my Donovan was born in England. That's where my parents met and got married. It's past due for me. And I know that our little one is curious about um, those people on the radio who speak in different accents, but it's clearly English. So yeah, we have to make the journey as a family. And I know that it would be so special and so amazing and anointed and ancestral stamped and all the things. Yeah.
It's been lovely to meet you both and get to know a little bit about your stories. I'm sure there's so many more conversations we could have, and maybe we will have them. But thank you so much for giving your time. And I thank you, especially you, Wendy, for fighting off people in the cafe who were trying to ruin our podcast. So thank you so much. Look after yourselves, and thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much.
okay, thank you.